inherent in making it is, and in living reliably off of your music, is understanding that the current age is reliant on your ability to navigate apps that get destroyed. And you can kind of anticipate that you need to diversify constantly.
Yes.
Honestly, and be aware of the relationship of the market with your music, because nobody wants to, but you do have to kind of be an entrepreneur in this environment.
What's going on? Welcome to The New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book. Today, my guest is Ricky Montgomery. You may know him from his Vine days. He was one of those Vine stars. You may know him from his band Honey Sticks, or you may know him because a couple of his songs went crazy viral on TikTok in 2020, which turned into a massive bidding war amongst, I believe, around 50 major labels. And it ended up with him signing with Warner Records. Now, this is a very interesting deal he signed. We get all into the weeds of this, so I encourage you to listen to the very end if you want to hear what major label deals for some artists are looking like these days, and definitely not for others. He gives some pretty interesting anecdotes of how the bidding wars went down with Warner and all the other major labels, and what the landscape is looking like these days for contract negotiations. And if you're an attorney out there or manager, I definitely encourage you to listen to this, because you're not going to find this info in Donald Passman's latest edition of his book. Believe me, I've read it. As always, please like and subscribe. Follow this show however you're listening to it. If you could leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, that really helps. If you're listening on YouTube right now, please comment. Let me know your favorite part. Find me on Instagram or Twitter at Ari Herstand. Of course, follow Ricky Montgomery all over the platforms, especially TikTok. His TikToks are hilarious these days, but of course he is on Instagram and YouTube and Twitter and the rest. You can find all of us that make this show happen at Ari's Take on Instagram and Twitter, and now TikTok. We definitely, yes, have a TikTok. You can find us over there. And make sure you visit aristake.com, sign up on that email list. That's where you're going to get the most up-to-date information, where we let you know about new episodes, but more importantly, what's happening in the industry, and reviewing companies, comparing them, all the stuff that you need to know running your career. aristake.com. Check it out. All right, let's kick into the show. Ricky Montgomery, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you.
Hello, and where are you coming to me right now? You're in LA, right?
I'm in LA, and I am specifically at Bedrock LA, which is a kind of rehearsal and recording space in Echo Park. So I've got a studio here.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. Like a lockout kind of space.
Yeah, it's like I have a live room and a control room, so it's like a little different than like a traditional lockout. I have another other lockout space for like specifically rehearsals.
Sure.
That I share with some other folks. But this is just my little space.
And is this something that you got because you're going stir crazy at home during COVID, and you didn't, or did you have a home studio or working space at home, or when did this situation arise?
That's a big part of it. Yeah, so like, honestly, it arose because I got signed, frankly.
Hey, cha-ching.
And so I was like, well, I can afford a studio now. But also, like, man, it was like a month into COVID, and I was just like writing. Like I wasn't performing or anything. And I have an upstairs neighbor, and I guess I was singing, and I got a text, and they said, hey, I'm doing an essay right now for school. Can you wait an hour? And I was like, if I'm not even doing like a live stream or something, this is just not going to work. And so once I had the opportunity, I decided to come here. And I've wanted to go to Bedrock for a while. It's like, at least in my circles, a pretty competitive place to get a lockout. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And are you live on the east side as well, Silver Lake area? I feel like I saw some of those clips in like Mr. Loverman video.
Yeah, actually, you're right. Yeah, that was, sorry, I spilled water on myself. Yeah, I live in Silver Lake right now. I'm about to move kind of to like Echo Park area to be like optimize my workflow in one kind
Yeah.
of radius, and not I can bike here now. But
Nice.
I still live in Silver Lake. I'm going to move at the end of the month. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. We shot
Cool.
like literally around my house for that video because again, COVID.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, I figured.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, my LA knowledge is getting greater. I moved over to the east side to Los Feliz a couple years ago, so I've been getting the lay of the land on the east side. I was West Hollywood for 8 years, and a very different realm, different world of Los Angeles, which is kind of cool when you move from a different part of the city because it's so spread out. It feels like you're moving cities, and you get to know a whole different part of the town. You moved back here. I say back here, but you moved back here in what, 2015,
That's
14,
right.
something? Okay.
Yeah.
And so because you were born here, but then you moved to St. Louis, you did college in St. Louis. So now, I guess, so do you consider yourself an LA native at this point, or because your mom still is in St. Louis, does that still feel home? Where's home?
Yeah, good question. I do consider myself a native because although my mom did move to St. Louis full time when I was 12 years old, so I lived here for 12 years from birth to like middle school. So I do consider myself a native. Like all my formative childhood memories are here.
Sure.
But yeah, my parents were divorced, so I would come back to LA for summers and winters until I was about 16. And so I still very much feel like I don't get to be called a native by other LA natives. I've realized like they don't like when I say that because I don't like have certain teenage memories like of places to go or whatever. But
Right.
I feel kind of like I spent 10 years in St. Louis collectively, and so I feel kind of like I'm both Midwestern and an LA native. So I feel kind of hybridized a little bit. I have little like things about Midwesternness, like polite things, like I like to talk to the people at the convenience store when I check out and stuff like that. So
Yeah. No, I did 25 years in Midwest. Winters specifically is one of the main reasons I came out to LA, but did the Wisconsin, Minnesota thing. And yes, we are a polite bunch.
Cold up there though, man. That's a freezing
Way
area.
too cold. Way too cold. Yeah, that was one of the main reasons for the move. It was like on a tour I was on, and it was blizzarding in -20 in Minneapolis in January, and I got to LA and it was sunny and 80. I'm like, humans live here? Why don't they live anywhere? Why do they live anywhere else than here? And that was kind of that sealed the deal for me. So I want to step back a little bit. So you spent many years touring, doing the indie rock, indie music guy thing, specifically with your band, the Honey Sticks. Talk about now the shift. I know you guys were about to go on a pretty big tour before COVID, right?
Yeah, we were.
And what were those rooms looking like that you were doing? Because I saw a bunch of dates on there, but I didn't see the venues.
Yeah, they were, as far as capacity, I want to say, I want to say around 500, somewhere in that ballpark. We had played one show. The band was Greer, who was the headliner, and that was our first kind of like direct support tour.
How did you get that set up? Who set that one up?
They did actually. They reached out to us. Cool. Their William Morris agent reached out to us, and so we had played with them before at this venue in Orange County called the Observatory, which is about 1,000, and it was the first time that I had ever played in front of that many people. So it was like a big kind of cool moment. And then, things were snowballing, and we were like getting close to like EP kind of mixing, mastering phase. And then, a virus came, and our producer almost died.
Oh gosh.
And obviously our tour was, the one that you're talking about was a perpetually
Did your producer
delayed.
get COVID? Is that how they almost died?
It's unclear, in my opinion. But he got whatever happened. He ended up getting put on antibiotics, and he thinks that he got what's called Levaquin poisoning. It's a type of antibiotic that I guess sometimes people have bad reactions to. And
I
don't know.
Caleb?
No, no.
Oh,
Caleb
okay.
is a member of the Honey Sticks who is no longer in the band just because he wanted
Gotcha.
to pursue his own thing.
Okay.
So shout out to Caleb Hurst. He's got a solo project, but
Yeah.
this is John Heiser is his name.
Got it.
He
Okay.
was in a St. Louis band called Building Rome in the mid 2000s. That was pretty
Nice.
big in that area. And yeah, he just was really sick for a long time, and was kind of out of commission for about, I want to say 6 months or so. So
Yeah.
a long time. We were very, very worried, but thankfully he's okay now.
So, okay. So before this big tour, this was your first big opening tour. Was how many gigs would you say that you had played prior to that with the Honey Sticks?
A lot. I mean, we'd only really gone on one tour is the thing. So like one
Okay.
official tour, we opened for a band called Private Island, and Derek Ted was another artist there. And other than that, somewhere in like the 30 to 40 range, I would estimate.
Okay.
Maybe a little less than that, but somewhere around there. We'd been active from 2015 to 2020.
Yeah. Okay.
On and off.
Cool. So, this is, the headline here of Ricky Montgomery of 2021, I guess 2020, 2021 early, is this album that you wrote, that you released in 2016. A couple of those songs just catch fire 4 years later during a pandemic on this platform called TikTok, which at the time were you even on?
I had an account. My bio says I don't have an account, so I have an unofficial account.
Okay.
But I did have one because I've been in those circles for a long time and kind of talking about like social media video circles.
Sure.
But
Because you were a Viner back in the day.
that's exactly, and that's originally how I had an audience that carried over into the Honey Sticks. But I did have an account. But I was not really active. I had maybe like 4 videos, and they were all just like me saying like, "What is this?" And just like trolling.
So, do you have any idea how that happened? Like how these two songs caught in a way, Mr. Loverman and Line Without a Hook, how they caught in a way where they just started to just go on this platform? On TikTok?
Well, kind of. So, the first one was Mr. Loverman that happened in like July of 2020, and that one I officially don't really know what the like inception of that really was. But if I had to guess, I had seen kind of like this thing happening since like late 2019 when I did like my first licensing deal, and that was for a game called OSU. And it's got an exclamation point in the name, OSU, and that's the name of the game. It's like a point and click kind of like almost like DDR type game, Dance Dance Revolution type game.
Is this a
almost like
computer
Beat
game?
Saber.
Or is this a iPhone game? Or
It's a PC game. I
Okay.
think you have to download the software direct. I don't know if
Gotcha.
it's available on Steam or anything, but it's a game like that. And I'd noticed that my solo album was getting popular there. Songs like Line Without a Hook actually were doing quite well there. And that game seems to have like a big kind of anime audience. And that's, I'm not sure what really made it work there. I think like we put a lot of work into like making the rhythm really tight on that album. So I think like maybe there's something there. It got big enough there that like some of like the big users, I guess, on that game, relative in that small pool, were playing the songs a lot and stuff. And so eventually OSU reached out to me and were like, "Hey, can we just license this so we don't have to worry about like how often people are using your songs here?" And I was like, "Sure," And
so
now,
they were using your songs in OSU. There's a way to use music in there that's not licensed. So you didn't actually like strike a licensing deal with the game initially.
It's open source, so
Gotcha. Okay.
anyone can kind of upload whatever they want. That's the whole, I guess, format. I'm not super caught up on exactly how it functions, but The reason that they wanted to license it was because they were offering me like a featured artist role. So basically, the songs would kind of similar to like a Guitar Hero. They have a set of songs that are in the game, short of what you upload yourself. I would basically be like that kind of a person, and my whole album would be there. So that was the first thing, and then a few other things kind of happened along the way, but nothing quite as big as that. And then, the things were kind of quiet, and I was focused on the Honey Six really from like 2016 until now. I was focused fully on that band. And so it was kind of like a weird, like, oh God, like I haven't put infrastructure into this solo project at all, really. And now this moment's happening. But the second thing so that was Mr. Loverman, just kind of happened in a vacuum.
Right.
And then I was like, okay, I've been doing social media work a lot the last 8-ish, some amount of years, because I also had marketing companies, which we can talk about if you want. But so I kind of knew the landscape. And so I thought, okay, all I have to do is react to this moment. I can build a TikTok audience quickly just by like, there's already like, it's catalyzing on its own. All I have to do is like put myself in front of it and put my face on it and be like, hey guys, here's the song creator. And then that seemed like me just doing that seems to kind of feed into the thing that was happening. And I noticed one show audience in particular who were reaching out to them right now. Hopefully something happens with that. But it's called Banana Fish. It's this really depressing anime. And it's really graphic, so content warning. But that I just started saying, I'm going to watch this show. And then once, for some reason, when I said that, like, that was the first time I had 1 million plays on a TikTok. Just saying I was going to watch it. So then I did like, okay, I guess I'll do a watch along. And then my Instagram blew up and everything. And that's when the second song started happening. So I think just this kind of like participatory factor, like kind of instigated the second song. And then whenever the second song happened, that's when like, Warner Records reached out and all these other record labels, Columbia and so on. I had, that whole phase.
You were essentially, what is so interesting also about TikTok functionalities is you were essentially collaborating inadvertently, I suppose, with the people who were using your songs. I mean, some of your most popular videos are just you duetting other people reacting to your song, and you're reacting to their reaction of your song or them listening to your song. Or I did see an anime person there. My favorite one is just this one girl screaming that fuck to your song. As she's probably just like, it had gotten to the point where it was like, the song that gets played incessantly on the radio and you just like cannot stand to hear it one more time. It was like, oh wow, that song had reached that level of virality where it's like, oh my God, great song, but please, I can't get me away from it, which is every artist's dream. So that was hilarious. But that's great. I mean, that was really smart to do. Now, is this something that was just natural intuition? You mentioned your marketing background, that you worked at a marketing agency for a couple of years. Did some of this come from that background, or was it something you were learning as you went? What inspired all that?
Well, so I co-founded a couple of marketing agencies, and that was in 2018. And I kind of like decided to go in that career direction because I had Vine, and I dropped out of college to pursue kind of digital world stuff. At the time, it wasn't just music. It was like I had done an internship at Adult Swim when I was 20 because of Vine, and so I thought maybe I'll try like comedy, but then I realized I didn't like the culture of that world at all. And
especially in New York, it can be a little aggressive. I've watched. I'm not a comedian. I'm not in the comedy world, but I love the comedy world, and I do those deep dives and watch every show that has to do with comedians. And they don't seem, ironically, they don't really seem like a cheery bunch. It could be a little intimidating.
You're not wrong, man. Like music, like I've realized, is way more like camaraderie centric than comedy is. And you'd think the opposite, because like they spend so much time like at shows with each other. It's just like competitive in a weirdly toxic way was my experience. But I did get to do some cool stuff. But anyway, so I had all this. I'd like kind of done like a shotgun approach to like the digital world. And so I felt that I had a lot of different things little pieces of knowledge, that maybe would give me a leg up in that world when I was, not making enough money off of music to do it full time, but wanting to do more than just minimum wage work. And so eventually that led me into kind of getting hired on salary at this startup, and then quickly became like an officer at this little startup. And then from there, we got a bunch of funding. It was taken away, as happens to startups sometimes, despite our contracts. And then I started my own creative agency for about a year. And then the passive revenue from music ended up being more than my revenue from my jobs that I was doing. And so I was like, well, I
never
cannot
hear that
justify
early on.
Never. And that was before the TikTok stuff. So
right.
It was cool.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because I'm assuming this passive revenue, was this coming from the Montgomery Ricky album, or was this a Honey Sticks revenue stream?
Yeah, so I think part of like the marketing for that, even that Warner is doing, is like trying to like make it simpler for people from my project, saying like he was doing nothing, and then all of a sudden TikTok happened, and then all this stuff. But like really, I had millions of streams already, and so I was like just trying to figure out what to do next. I think that like with Spotify specifically, and also YouTube, I think, and actually TikTok as well, but specifically Spotify, if you're able to hit like thresholds of streams, I find you just get recommended more and more. And so especially at 1 million, there's like, me and my band, we talk about like this faucet being like turned on all of a sudden. And I think that you have those at any milestone, like 10,000 or 1,000 and spaces in between, obviously 100,000. But so I think that I had been in that kind of space for a while, really probably since 2016, because it wasn't, there was like a Billboard article that called it like a nominal success. And I guess that is a fair way to put it. Like it was like not a failure, but it was like not like meteoric. And so it had just kind of like been snowballing slowly over time and kind of cooking. And then enough things happened, and then we had, a depressing time, I think, was part of it. Like the songs are somewhat sad, and then the world was sad. And so kind of made sense, I think, contextually.
Well, let's step back a little bit, because you're right. I mean, you were getting significant streams. I mean, I think just on your solo project in 2019, you posted one of your Spotify Wrapped year-end Wraps, which had 10 million streams that year, which is nothing to scoff at.
Right.
And and that's for the solo stuff. But so what were you doing? I mean, you guys were running an indie music career. So like, let's just talk through a little bit of that. What the day-to-day, what you were working on. Because, so you notice when you get to these levels, the 10,000, the 1 million, that the algorithm picks up a little bit and the recommendation engine starts going, and you're starting to get in all these extra playlists and stuff like that. But I'm assuming there was more behind the scenes that you guys were actually facilitating more than it just, it's happening magically.
Yeah, totally. So I think the Honey Sticks was kind of, in my head, I thought of it as like a lateral move. When I moved to LA, originally I moved to LA really because I wanted to come back home, was how I thought of it spiritually. But more pragmatically, I thought of it as, I want to be in a better music industry than St. Louis can offer me. Like there is an industry, but it's not necessarily what I felt where I wanted to go was happening.
There's only so many people that are going to buy records from Vintage Vinyl, right?
Exactly. Well, yeah, you know about Vintage Vinyl. Thank you. Shout out to Vintage Vinyl.
Shout out to Vintage. Yeah,
dude,
the Loop, man.
Yeah,
of course.
The Loop.
My brother lives in St. Louis, and I used to tour through there a bunch. So yeah,
cool.
I lived at Vintage Vinyl when I would ever go there. It's a great spot.
Well, I was told by APA that St. Louis is a tertiary market recently, so love that. But that's that speaks to kind of the perception from the industry of that city and kind of why I felt I had to leave if I wanted to quickly have something happen.
Yes.
Anyway, so I decided, I was in bands in St. Louis since I was 14, and I did fairly well. Like I got, my band was mentioned on the radio one time, which is crazy. All people in my high school were like, "Whoa!" But
Is
at
this
the
like
time,
MySpace era? Is
yes,
this what we're talking here? Okay.
it is
So you were,
MySpace. I had a
MySpace crew.
Pure Volume was what I ended up going to after MySpace, which
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
really happen for long. And
I remember Pure Volume.
yeah,
Yeah. Did you have the emo hair swoop going on at the time too? The
a
MySpace
little.
swoop?
I was never like that confident to like embody like a fashion trend enough in high school.
Okay.
So I was kind of just like a bit of a normie, I think. But
Got it.
so yeah, so I was doing the ground game stuff in LA because I thought, okay, I know that the touring market is different than the streaming market. I already knew that. And so I had to build up the touring market. And I tried going on tour with the solo album first and just doing Ricky Montgomery with like a band that I got, from a mixture of friends and Craigslist. And then I realized, I can't afford touring. Like it's very expensive.
Especially not with a band. Yeah.
No, not at all. And so I decided, okay, well, let's just build in LA then. And then I kind of realized I didn't like being a solo artist as much. So I did, the Honey Sticks. It started out as Ricky Montgomery and the Honey Sticks as a way to kind of funnel fans there. And yeah, so that's what we were doing for a long time. And we got better and better at it as time went on. We realized kind of more infrastructural things we had to do. Like eventually we realized, we shouldn't buy merch in bulk. We should use a print on demand company. Things like that, like little kind of cheats and hacks.
Talk about the streaming side. So you realize that, okay, touring is very expensive. So let's work the streaming angle and just play shows around LA. I think I saw in one of the Honey Sticks videos, you guys playing the Satellite at some point. And was it the Satellite or the Echo? There was like some... there was some stream, like glittery streamy things, which is like reminiscent of what the Satellite was in the background of that. Or where was that?
That's Amplify. That's
Amplify. Oh,
hell
gosh.
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
In the beginning, this is
the all ages venue.
Some advice for LA musicians who are trying to make things work. I realized really early on that free shows were all 21 plus in LA. And I had a young audience. And so I was in a pickle and I realized, okay, cut out the middleman. I'm renting the venue. And so Amplify was the most affordable venue that I could rent. And so it was 80 capacity so that I could start saying, I sold out all these shows this month, or this, I tried only doing one a month at the time. And
this was all ages, Amplify.
All ages, because I could do an all ages show and make the profit, most of it, off of it. Because we did one show with like some like Sonic Bids person, if you know Sonic Bids.
Yes.
I don't know, some booking agency that works there. And I realized these are $14 tickets. What the hell is happening? Like, and so then we changed it to $8 or like $9 or something. And so we like kind of like, got a bit like more microeconomic in our approach. Really committed to that slow burn, even though we did have, I had like, 200K on Vine at the time. And like I had a fair amount of online stuff happening. And so, it was just like slowly grinding in the LA area. And then kind of once we realized, okay, like it's mean to our fans to continue playing an 80 capacity venue. And so then we started going to El Cid was another place we went to. We would also do the same kind of thing. They actually have an in-house person who does their booking, so it's a little easier. But
so you were grinding the LA scene, but so let's talk streaming and how you were building this up and like tricks and tips and what. How'd you figure this out?
The best thing that I've ever done for streaming. I say this to a lot of people and they don't like it when I say this, but it's the best solution in my opinion. It's just getting an influencer kind of side to your brand, and like figuring out some sort of way to exist on a digital platform, like you have, for example. Like this kind of like other side of your like music career in a way. for me, it's been doing like online videos and just like kind of doing like dumb content. Less so now, but a lot in the beginning. That's why, I ended up kind of getting distracted and going to Adult Swim for a while, because I always went into Vine thinking, oh, this is going to be a trampoline for my music career. And I'll just figure out how to make it work. And a lot of people do that, and it works at a pretty crazy degree in my experience with people. Like, they'll go in and they'll start making like memes and stuff, or they'll start making, whatever feels natural for them. I don't think you should go in thinking like, oh, there's the best way to do it is memes, or the best way to do it is covers, or the best way to do it is X. I think you need to try a few things and then figure out what creates analytics for you, and then just follow that, and then see how you can improve on it and be self-critical and be realistic, and from there, find natural opportunities to drop your links and stuff, and be patient, but that's, in my view, the best way to get streams from a digital platform.
So Vine died end of
Yes.
2016, and had you leveraged that audience off the platform somewhere else?
Yeah, so I had been working on that for a long time. I put out my first EP in 2014, and so I've been on Vine the day after the app launched, in 2013, January 25th, yeah, when the very beginning, I was just lucky, and I saw like a CNN article that was talking about Vine, like, Twitter has this new app. Can it change the world in 6 seconds? And I was like, what does that mean? And then I downloaded it. And yeah, like me and my friends just started making videos, and we got in like the Popular Now page, which at the time, like you had to get like 80 likes to get on it. But like,
Right.
I thought, okay, Twitter owns this, so it's going to be famous. It was my logic. So I should just get big now before the app does, and then I'll reap the rewards. And so it worked. TikTok, I think, was a little different because it was a merger. So it was Musical.ly and TikTok.
Right.
So there was no point in the app's career where it was small necessarily.
But from Vine, so you had this following on Vine. You'd built it up for the almost 4 years. You have this great following, hundreds of thousands of people. Now, were you taking them when they gave a little bit of a warning saying what, like, Vine's dying in like 2 months, so everybody's scrambling.
Yeah.
It's like, were you pointing people to Instagram? Were you pointing people to YouTube? Did you get their email lists? Like, what were you doing to be like, oh gosh, like, I don't want to lose my entire following because this platform that I built up, it's going. So
Yeah.
What'd you do?
I was lucky because I'd been doing it for years, like the whole kind of seeding to other platforms. I bring up the 2014 EP because that's when I like officially started marketing my music on Vine. And before that, I had been teasing it, and I was always conscious of diversification of social medias because of just the kind of the nature of the career that I wanted was like, okay, I don't want them to be on Vine forever, so I should already start working to say, hey, if you want to follow me on Instagram or on YouTube or whatever, here are my handles. So occasionally, what you would do on Vine, and I think it's platform specific, the ways that you want to accomplish this. I think TikTok is a little different, but for Vine, I would just occasionally post a Vine and be like, here's my Instagram, really is what I would do. And then, it gets easier as your platform builds to have success in that. But in the beginning, like, you maybe get 5 followers, maybe 6,
Sure. Yeah.
But that's all part of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I asked this because, we've seen this time and time again of the artists build up massive followings on a platform. That platform dies. The artist didn't transfer that audience or get the audience contact information in any capacity. I mean, I experienced this firsthand. I toured with a MySpace star. He was one of the biggest, it was always like in the charts. It was like top 3 unsigned artists. He was always in the top 3. Yeah. And we went on a, we set up this tour for 2011. It was a huge 60-day tour. And mind you, 2011 is about a year and a half after MySpace kind of went, kaput, more or less. Right. And he had like 70 million streams on MySpace. It was just like he was the MySpace king, but he hadn't transferred any of those fans elsewhere. So we went on this huge tour. We drastically, I was the support act, but we drastically undersold tickets because he had no way of getting in touch with any of these fans. Like, he had sold, I think it was something like 10 or 20,000 downloads in just the city of Dallas alone. And like, we're like, oh man, like, we're going to crush in Dallas. And like, 200 people show up to the show. It's like, but that's the thing, is like, iTunes wasn't giving us their email addresses. So we could like email them and be like, hey, coming through town, you're going to dig, but like, so it's a cautionary tale because, okay, MySpace died. I had a lot of friends who were Viners also, and they didn't necessarily have the foresight where they had hundreds of thousands of followers too. They didn't transfer them. So when Vine died, they lost their following and then we're scrambling. We're seeing this, it's cyclical. And so we don't know how long TikTok's going to stick around and what it's going to look like. But so you had the foresight early on and you knew, like, were you now taking them, just pointing them to YouTube, pointing them to Instagram, or were you like, hey, like, I've seen this story before, let me get your emails, let me get your phone numbers, let me own the fans, not just rent them to other social platforms?
Yeah, I think I had the producer I was working with was also a MySpace person, and so maybe like in my head, I had maybe in a subconscious way been aware of the inherent, impermanence of all of these places, including YouTube, and you could make an argument for Facebook or whatever, but like, stretch out time enough. But like, I was just doing that really. I knew from crimes of the past. Hopefully one day we can get some kind of union or something. So like, because when Vine happened, and I'm sure when MySpace happened too, like. Careers were destroyed, I'm sure that guy had a major hit, and like, not everyone's built to diversify. Like, we're not all good at it, and so we shouldn't have to be, in my opinion. And recently, this wasn't even a story anywhere. Like, Twitter, there was a Vine archive that they still hosted the website from 2017, because it technically went down in January 2017. You were right. They made it. Actually, I have an anecdote I'll tell in a second about the day that it went down. But like, so the Vine archive was just deleted the other day, like 2 weeks ago or a week ago, which was where they housed all the Vines that were still loading. And they just deleted it. And I'd been hearing about how Twitter's trying to like triple their revenue this year to impress investors post-Trump presidency or something like that.
Right.
Because now they're, I don't know, maybe going to see less usership. But like, so I have to assume that they cut a corner there on like the cost of the servers or something. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I inferred.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But so there's just, you're right. There's this trend that's not a short-lived trend of just creators who create the platforms effectively, they create what they become, and do all the content for free. Vine was not paying. MySpace, I assume, was also not paying creators. TikTok, bless them, have learned that lesson at least, and they have a creator program. But like, and YouTube is actually, in my opinion, one of the better places for this. But like, they just fuck up careers permanently, and they don't even say sorry, like they don't do anything about it. So that's something that I learned, the apathy of maybe just capitalism affecting art, treating it as extra.
That's interesting because absolutely, social platforms traditionally have had little to no regard for the creators that make them what they are, and that's a story as old as the internet, because Silicon Valley and just these platform creators, these developers, whatever, they are interested in growth. They're interested in freedom of information and freedom and down with copyright and IP. Everything should be free. And, that's always been the battle between the music industry and Silicon Valley. And that's like, as old as Napster and where the
Right.
industry was battling them and all of that. But that also being said, I mean, it has, in a sense, democratized the music industry. Like, there were artists that built careers from MySpace. Sure, they weren't getting paid directly from MySpace, but MySpace gave them a platform when labels wouldn't, when they weren't getting the blessing of the industry at the time. And this has continued on. And we're seeing this now as just like, in a massive way in 2020, DIY artists, non-label artists made over $2 billion on just recorded music collectively.
Wow.
Like, this is a massive, massive force right now because of the internet, so it's like,
Right.
yes, I fully empathize. Like, on one hand, yeah, of course, streaming, not just streaming, but like social platforms should be compensating their creators in a better way. I mean, you think YouTube's doing a great job? That's great. But like the ad revenue, the split is like, it's not great. Like,
Not
you need
great.
you need gazillions of views to actually see some revenue from their ad split. But regardless, and of course, like Spotify, yes, there are a lot of artists making really significant livings from Spotify revenue. It is a misnomer that Spotify doesn't pay. It pays really well, especially if you get, blessed by the playlist gods. It came out last year that on Spotify alone, there are 43,000 musicians who are making a living just from Spotify revenue. That's more musicians, more individual musicians in the history of the music industry at any given time, at a certain moment in time. So we can talk about, okay, Spotify has enabled that. And yes, they're paying less, less than half a penny a stream. And you look at that, but it's a totally different conversation. But this all brings me to the point, and the question that has been burning in me, and the reason that I brought you on is, so we're in a landscape right now where DIY indie musicians are thriving. You don't need the major label infrastructure to have a successful career. Now, I am very curious, as someone who had been running a successful indie music career, why did you choose to sign with a major label? I know I read somewhere you had like a bidding war of like 50 labels coming at you, but like, if the story of 2020 that's going down in the history books, the story of 2020 in the music industry is that every signing of every major label was someone who broke out on TikTok like you or went viral on TikTok.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, why did you decide to sign with a major label like Warner Records?
Yeah, because we got a great deal is the short answer.
Okay.
So I own my masters. Maybe Warner doesn't want me to say that, but I do.
No shit, that's huge.
I do.
Okay.
And I don't
Right.
need to go too far into the nitty gritty of my deal. But I did retain ownership.
Huge.
And there is a fairly long licensing period, I will say, as a sort of like, to also say that. Yeah, the way that it typically works currently is that when you retain ownership of your masters, they do have licensing, exclusive licensing to your catalog, whatever you've signed over, for a certain amount of time.
So the licensing is huge, that the fact that you're not giving up ownership of the masters. Now explain what the difference is between a licensing deal where you retain ownership, but they have exclusive licensing for, X number of years versus giving them your masters in perpetuity. What's the difference?
So I'm not an expert, but as far as my understanding of that is the ownership of the masters thing is more of like an old school way of doing label stuff. That's what happened with like, the Beatles, for example, or other artists. They were from earlier or some more recent decades. But so you would, get a big advance and everything for a certain number of albums. But then typically you would, obviously advances are a debt model. So you will get an advance of your estimated royalties over a certain amount of time, say 1 year, and they'll pay you that up front off of calculations that they've made, educated guesses of what you were supposedly, looking at the data, you'll make, $1.5 million in a year. So let's give you $2 million, and then you recoup at a certain split rate.
Yes.
50-50 is sort of common. And
I
in
mean,
today's
traditionally for
market,
major labels, it was they would keep 85%, you'd get 15%
yeah,
only after you recouped.
technically it's
You're
16%. But yes, no,
16, sure,
you're right.
right,
Yeah.
right. About that, yeah. So that is the traditional,
Yeah.
master ownership model. So you're saying
Mhm.
with the licensing model these days, or what you're seeing is more of a 50-50 royalty split, or we're not on that model yet that you're talking about.
It depends. So it's sort of varied, which is another reason why we decided to go as opposed to staying independent. Because originally, when we had Mr. Loverman happening, we did have some labels reach out. We had APG/Atlantic reach out. We had Columbia reach out, and a couple others offered me a single licensing deal, which no one should take, because effectively they buy your master from you, offer you an advance of like $30K for a song that's doing viral numbers. So they're
Right.
buying your song, basically, in effect. And then they would own the master. And the reason that, artists, I'm speaking not at you, but artists who don't know this, you don't have any control over what happens with the songs. So
Right.
maybe you don't want your song used for, let's say, this wouldn't happen, but let's say a Trump rally, and you don't want it to be used there. You wouldn't necessarily be able to say no to that. Not that the label would want that to happen, but like, let's just say that they did and you didn't want it. You wouldn't be the person to say you can't do that because it's not your legal right anymore, because you've waived that. Yeah, so in olden times, it was more of the 84-16 split, and they would retain ownership. And even after you recoup, as in you pay back your master through your advance through all your royalties, then you only make 16% of your total streaming revenue. And then if you have splits with other people, say a producer or band members, then you make even less. And so
Yes.
it's great. It's been a really nice model all up until this time. Super fair.
For the labels, right.
Exactly.
Yes.
But yeah, so I'll just go a little bit further into the weeds here with stuff because I had to learn all this a few months ago.
Yes.
Yeah, 50-50 is a lot more common now. And I think that that's mostly because of what you're describing with this indie market being way bigger, and obviously, piracy and Spotify, the whole history there has played into that. But more so, I think it's because you have more autonomy now. And especially in my position, I had a lot of autonomy and I had a lot of leverage. Not only did I have a bidding war, but I also had, at least the illusion of control over the numbers, because per their perspective and per my arguments in our meetings, was like, well, I created this second wave with this other song, so maybe I can do another one. I don't know. You don't know.
Right.
So that was part of. I had a rare situation, and I was very fortunate. But usually people will have a 50-50 deal. You'll hear people who, I don't want to say it. I don't want to tell people's details of their deals, but a lot of artists that people listen to a lot have 50-50 deals with Interscope or Republic or these other large labels, and sometimes they will have an ownership of their masters, but 50-50 is a lot more common now.
I mean, this with the history of this is relatively a very new concept. Like major labels were not doing licensing deals. They definitely weren't doing 50-50 deals, even as near as like 5-6 years ago. So like we are in a very, very new era where they're offering this stuff. It's in the history of the music industry, there's only like a handful of artists, and they always make headlines when they actually get to retain their ownership of their masters. It was like Ray Charles, and it was, there's just like Janet Jackson. Like there's just a few of these artists that have ever been able to retain their master ownership from the labels, because the labels were always the ones that had clout. It was never like, I've never seen a higher percentage than like 20% that the artist gets. Now we're talking 50, 60%. Like this is a whole new era we're in because of what has happened with the indie DIY community and the massive success that artists are having. And yes, the labels are like, they don't need us anymore. Whereas like before, the labels were the gatekeepers. Now they're not. And like the labels are like a bank, but they have connections. And so that brings me to, again, why Warner?
Yeah. So that's why we decided to go with a label, because you're not, you're not wrong. Like you have the ability to make money as a musician, but you don't have the ability as much. There are walls still. So playlisting is one of those situations.
Sure.
You can get on some editorial playlists without a label. You can make friends with people. Say Lorem is a good example. There's like a certain curator who people have become, friends with, and they have, their own tastes and they discover stuff on their own. But like that's more of like you can get there independently. And I've been playlisted before without label backing. But once I got on a label, it was like, oh my God, like it's just so much more access to that particular market, which is a very valuable market. And then also, there's a certain social cachet that comes with being on a label. Like even just this studio that I'm in right now, like I CC'd my label people on the email, there are certain like individual moments where it makes you look more serious or more of like a sure bet for things. Like it's like having a high credit score or something. It's like, like you just have a certain kind of like air around you that people take more seriously because there's infrastructure kind of that you can fall back on. And also, I don't need to be in charge of digital marketing anymore. I don't need to be in charge of outreach to radio stations in Indonesia and things like that, which happens, like real things that I'm doing on a weekly basis that I have to. All I have to do in my daily life is sit down and read an email as opposed to do all that stuff. And I do have a manager, but even the two of us are not necessarily able to do all of these things. And I don't think that you need these things as a musician. It's a question of where do you want to scale to and what are your specific goals. And for me, I wanted to be an international artist, and I wanted to there's just only so much that one person can do at the end of the day.
Sure.
And there are other major, similar situations to a major label. Say you can go to do a distribution deal, like AWOL is an example. And Level is another place. And there are these places with really competitive distribution rates, like below 10% sometimes of what you pay them from your royalties.
Right.
And I recommend those to people who don't have access to labels. We did STEM. We actually still with the Honey Six do STEM.
Great.
There's a lot of stuff like that.
STEM's 10%. They used to be 5%. Now they're 10%. Women Run. Milana is amazing, CEO of STEM. There's STEM. There's AWOL. There's the Orchard, Ingrooves, Believe, Level, Empire. These are all these more or less, you call them label services, independent distribution companies, which take anywhere from 10 to 20% typically they keep of that commission. But they have a lot of these more label services that they offer.
And for most people, that's all you need. I find that up until doing international touring and stuff, like you can do all of that through one of these distributors. So like you don't need to, it's not wrong that you can retain a lot of your independence without a label now. And I think, and they do know that. But there are certain labels, the biggest ones, will still not do certain deals. I was told we tried to have a certain label match our offer from Warner, who we ended up going with, obviously. And they responded, we only do that for Beyonce.
Right. And that's...
So I said, okay.
But that's the thing is like, that's why I mean, it's very surprising to me hearing that you got a licensing deal from Warner with, I'm assuming, a fairly sizable advance. I don't know how much.
I don't know how
reveal,
much.
But
I don't know if I want to get an email from the CEO of Warner after this. But like,
all right, fine, we can cut that too. But that's the thing is this like it is very astounding, and maybe that's why your publicist is on the call right now too. Like she's gonna come at me afterwards like, we're cutting from 33 to 42
we gotta
minutes.
Get him out of there.
It's out. I'm waiting for her to bring the cane out and just to yank you out of the Zoom screen.
They are not very controlling. They are very fair label to me. So
okay,
I should say
and that's great. So explain to me. I'm still not clear on, I've read Passman's book. I think we all have, like, we know how the history of record labels work and all of that. But this licensing thing is a really new concept in the major label space. And like you experienced, we don't do this. We only do this for Beyonce, which is what I've been hearing about. Taylor Swift got the licensing deal from Universal with Lucian Grange when she went over there.
Right.
From Big Machine. And we're like, oh, but she's the only one because she's the superstar, the biggest star in the world. But now she's not the only one. And that's actually very surprising to hear, which actually says a lot to you and your team and your manager that you kind of sifted through all these deals and didn't take the first deal that came your way for the one single to give up your biggest song for $30,000.
Yeah, that
which
was
is
not
crazy.
Happen.
So that's great. But I guess I still am not super, I don't quite understand the difference still of what licensing deal means versus ownership, other than after, set number of years, you now can do whatever you want.
I think that I could be a little bit wrong about this, so preface with that. But my understanding of the difference between the license and the master ownership, obviously it's temporary, so there's that. But so I think that there are certain things they cannot do with your masters. So no one can sell your masters other than you. So
yes,
there are certain things that like are just not able to be done that used to be able to be done. And, frankly, I'm not exactly sure what situations would arise where, like, the difference would manifest. But just as far as, like, I did actually have to buy my masters. I realized in my contract that I had a producer who had partial ownership of my masters. And so in that negotiation, I also had to buy them back before signing my deal, which was highly costly. So if you have recently signed a deal with a producer, make sure you read it fully. 21-year-olds.
Right.
So yeah, that was a huge pain in the ass. And thankfully that's over with. But that was super stressful. I definitely gained a few gray hairs at the end of last year. But obviously we came out on a strong note. But
sure.
Yeah, that's to my knowledge, like the main difference is that it's temporary and that you could kind of control where it goes.
So now, I don't know, typical, but to major label form, so the first couple songs you release with Warner are more or less re-releases of your two, viral TikTok hits, Line Without a Hook and Mr. Loverman, but now with special guests on them. So Line Without a Hook has MXM Tune, Mr. Loverman has Chloe Moriondo. Now, did they facilitate that? Or I think I read somewhere that MXM Tune was a fan of yours and you linked up with her. How did this all happen?
Yeah. So with those types of features, they're usually kind of like behind the scenes manager stuff, or like, I've found that like when you see artists release those, especially label artists, usually it's not, I mean, sometimes it is, but usually it's not like, I loved their music and I texted them and we did this song. It's usually this market really overlaps well with this one, and like let's link these two people up and see if this works. It was kind of like that, particularly with Chloe. Although we did know each other's, like she did a cover of like a Honey Stick song a while back and on her YouTube account. It was at the time was like the biggest content piece that the Honey Sticks had was her cover. And so I had that in the back of my mind as like, I want to do something with Chloe at some point, because like she was a fan of ours, and then she had a big audience that kind of kept growing and eclipsed us. And then I had this moment, and then I kind of had an opportunity to like thank her in a way, was my logic. But it was also like Elektra is who she's with, or she's with a kind of imprint on Elektra called, I think, Public Consumption. But that was another label that was trying to work with us and sign us at the time. And so we were kind of like testing the waters with this song, but then we had the other song happen. So we actually had this recorded for a long time, the last remix we put out, and then it kind of kept getting kind of delayed because of what was happening with our project. But
Sure.
Yeah, so both of them, I also did know MXM and her name is Maya. I knew her beforehand a little bit. So they were like they were sort of kind of like business decisions, but also I did already know them, and I did kind of want to do stuff with them and get more into their worlds and vice versa. So yeah, that was that. But like as far as go ahead.
Oh no, and these are just they didn't really. These are just remixed, remastered with their vocals on them, and so they just opened up the original sessions, and it was just like, all right, we're gonna mute you here, pop her voice in here, and we're gonna, bring your add some more compression to your vocals and print
more or
it.
less. It's sort of like that. It's not exactly that. Like we, for example, on Line Without a Hook, we did actually automate some backing vocals into this track to make it sound a bit more full. Little things. Line Without a Hook or Mr. Loverman, we actually did technically remix that song. We didn't fully remix the other one, but we did fully remix Loverman, and I think that you can hear that. But as far as like why they happen, on the label side, they're a way to reintroduce old songs to DSPs, digital streaming platforms.
Like Spotify, Apple.
Like Spotify, and that, in my case, it's like, oh, this is maybe an opportunity to get on New Music Friday or to get on to Today's Top Hits, because we actually were on Today's Top Hits, and then I saw on my back end, which is the 28 million editorial playlist, we had 4 plays on it, and then we got removed.
Oh,
and
my
I don't know what
gosh.
happened. It was such a frustrating thing to see.
Wow.
I guess it was too old. I don't know. They like new songs, which makes sense.
4 plays on Today's
Some
Top Hits.
Some like really small number, single-digit number.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because Today's Top Hits is the #1 followed playlist on Spotify, like you said, 28 million followers or something like that. And I have heard editors in the past say you can't really buy your way into Today's Top Hits. It's basically whatever is trending on all the other playlists will eventually make its way to Today's Top Hits.
Right.
And but
it's semi-algorithmic. The viral playlists are all like US Viral 50 and so on. Those are algorithmic, but Today's Top Hits, I've realized, is not, because there was a moment where we were doing that. Like we were on, not only viral charts, which are different than daily charts, because daily is like gross numbers, and then viral is like, I guess, like percentage increase or whatever. But I think that they are semi-curated. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it is curated. There is a person, but I believe, from my understanding, is when the songs start, they basically are testing them out on all these other playlists, and if they get a really good response, they'll kind of go into a batch where the editor will be like, aha, all right, this song, that song,
It's save rate. That's the metric they use, is save rate.
Save rate, like skip rate, save rate, how many playlists you're at, it's being added to, like user personal playlists. There's a bunch of different metrics, but save rate is a huge one.
Yeah, well, that's the one that I'm told all the time. Is like, oh, your save rate's going crazy on this song. So like, okay, I guess that's what you guys like.
Things that we can see in our back end Spotify for Artists thing, even though like Spotify has. That's the one. Those are a couple stats they reveal to us, but there's so many more. And like if you go into the chart metric backend, you'll see a bit more because they tap into Spotify's API. But there are quite a few. So what's coming next? I mean, are you working on an album now for your kind of debut Warner album, or what's going on?
Yeah, I have 2 albums with Warner that are going to be happening, and the first one I'm in the middle of making right now. Kind of deciding the release plan. It's weird because I do feel like I'm building infrastructure right now for the whole project. Like I'm like fixing my website right now and like relaunching that.
I noticed that the main video on your website right now is currently broken, by the way. So
great to know. Thanks. I mean. It's a weird situation where like we are having meetings about the website, if anyone's hearing this and curious about the website. But we do have a functioning merch website, store.rickymontgomery works. EP thinking toward the end of the year,
Okay.
and then thinking maybe like using that as like pick 2 of the favorite tracks from there and put them on the LP. Hopefully early next year is what we're estimating, because we're kind of trying to like line it up with a tour, and you know, touring, we'll see, maybe the end of
Fingers
this
crossed
year.
will be coming back. Yeah.
We'll see. But yeah, that's the plan.
What's the
and then,
process like
yeah.
with working on this album? Is your has your workflow changed at all now that you are with a major? Are they saying, "All right, we're getting you into this writing session. I want you to work with this producer and this writer, and then I want you to come up with 100 songs, and then we'll pick the 5 best"? Or like, how is it working?
It's kind of like that. It's not as it's sort of like that.
It's not as grumpy. It's
not
a lot
as
friendlier
grumpy.
when they say it, right?
They're framed as suggestions, so they're not like telling me. That's like, what do you think about this guy? I think he's great, but they are usually right, which to their credit.
Sure.
That's because I did also pick Warner partially based on their A&R, which is if anyone is listening to this and going through their own situation with the label, you interact with your A&R most often at a label. Pick based on A&R if you can.
Well, I'm going to add a caveat to that. Yes, you are absolutely correct. You interact most with A&R at a label. However, people are disposable, so you don't actually sign with
true.
an A&R. You sign with a contract, and you sign with a corporation. So be
Very
very,
important
very
caveat.
careful that you're not just going with someone because you love their A&R.
Yeah.
They could be replaced next week, and you're stuck with their contract forever. So just
Not
quick
only
caveat.
that, I'll add on to that. You can be moved from your A&R to a different one, independent of your choosing. I've seen that happen to somebody. But it happens, you know, for a variety of reasons. But anyway, yeah, so they are actually putting me in the room with some really great producers, and I have some dates booked with some folks I've wanted to work with for a long time.
Nice.
And yeah, I haven't had the sessions yet, so I don't want to drop their names quite yet. But
Sure.
um,
And how are
Yeah.
sessions working these days? Are you
Zoom.
getting into physical space? You're doing it on Zoom and like what, audio movers, or what's the tech you're using?
I had my first writing session in person of the whole pandemic, and that was because he was vaccinated. So you can do in person. Some people do in person, but they strictly do it. And Warner, to their credit, is very serious about this, and so is SAG, by the way, who's behind the scenes a very important union in the music industry, SAG-AFTRA. But they are very serious about having people test and testing at the correct time. And so I did my COVID test on Saturday, and I had my session on Tuesday. I got the results back I think Sunday night.
Was that with Adam Melchor that you had?
It was
this
with Adam
session with?
Melchor, who's amazing. Love him. Also,
I saw him. You posted a little story on him melodyning some of your vocals. And the percentage drift that he was using. Interesting. If you're wondering, Ricky Montgomery uses about 50% drift on Melodyne.
Well,
so, okay.
I don't know if I'm going to stay with that.
I'm just kidding.
But yeah, that's what Adam uses.
Right.
And I had used Melodyne for years. I just didn't. Man, I'm like learning everything at once on like Pro Tools and stuff like that, and so I'm trying to like right now I have I'm testing out my BAE DMP 1073 at the bottom, if you guys know preamps. But so I'm like learning all this gear nonsense. But
Cool.
Another reason I wanted to go with the label was because of the resources in general that you have access to. So if you're an independent artist, it's a lot harder to get on the phone with certain producers. I've realized, because a lot of the times, like once they're in, they say like the Warner system or the Sony system, or these these companies that actually own the labels. It's a lot easier for them to get work, and so they just sit at home and like wait for labels to pitch them people. Actually, during my negotiation, interesting little anecdote. An A&R at a certain other label that we didn't go with, who was like really energetic A&R, was like, "Who do you like? Who are your producers you like?" And I was like, "I don't know, some person." And they were like, "Okay, check your phone." And then I was in a group text with them all of a sudden, which is highly embarrassing.
Oh God.
But that's just
one way for them to flex. Yeah.
yeah, it's just a peek behind the curtain of like how I learned like, oh, that's how it works. Like it's just
Yeah.
A&Rs texting people. Like, okay,
Yeah.
fair enough, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's kind of how it works. Is like you're like kind of liaised these deals, and then you can say no to them if you want, or you can say yes to them. And I've mostly said yes. I've said no to a couple, but only because of personal reasons. But
Sure.
yeah.
So they're over Zoom right now. That these sessions
Mostly.
How are writing sessions working over Zoom? Is there chemistry?
Everyone hates it. Everyone hates it. I realized I was on the phone with the producer the other day. I like to do like discovery meetings where I just get on the phone for like 20 minutes and like get to know them a little bit just to make sure that I can talk to them.
Right.
And it makes sense and feels good. But yeah, during it, the guy, I guess his manager didn't really tell him that it was like that kind of a meeting, and he was like, "So are we gonna like start writing or something?" And I was like, "Oh no, this is just like us meeting." And he's like, "Oh my God, thank God." This is like a Grammy-nominated producer, so he's like,
gosh.
"This is terrible." Like every single person, I've never heard anyone say that they liked them. But a lot of songwriters that do just songwriting have been working that way. Like, yeah, it's all through Zoom. I've realized, but some people are doing in person.
Are you going to keep the production similar to the two singles things? I mean, similar to your LP from 2016, which is very band focused, very organic. Or are you exploring other production avenues that might be a bit more pop, let's say?
I'm gonna keep it analog for the most part.
Cool.
Just because that's what I like, and also what I know how to do the best. So I want to kind of build on my strengths and play to my strengths. I'm looking at this next project as kind of like me getting on first a bit, with just having a successfully crafted album, and I was a lot worse as a musician on the last project, and a lot of it was kind of done with like a hired out drummer as opposed to like my drummer, or bass players and stuff. And so I'm taking it kind of as a challenge, now that I'm a lot better at playing, to play more on the record myself and stuff. Not that I didn't before, but like there were like lead guitar parts that I like was like, can you make this cooler with like some other person? And then they would.
Sure.
So I'm definitely saying analog, but it's also a weird kind of digital era that I want to also participate in. So like a lot of the bands that I like a lot, like there's this guy, he's a producer for Spill Tab, David Marinelli. That band, they're doing pretty well. I think they just signed to Arista Records. Congrats to them. Yeah, I'm gonna be working with him a lot, and he's very like Ableton focused, and they do lots of kind of like, it's still somewhat analog, but just like a lot of effects on top of analog instruments, that sort of stuff.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to hear what this next phase is going to be for you, especially the EP. You said this fall or so, and then the forthcoming LP. Congratulations on a great deal signing. I learned a lot from this. I honestly, you opened up my world a little bit. I didn't realize that these kinds of deals were happening right now, and so you can feel confident that this was a solid step, and it can be very scary, I would imagine, when you start to have these conversations with personalities that are probably pretty aggressive and like trying to flex left and right, and you say, "Oh, your favorite producer is in your phone right now on text." I mean, my God, prepare me a little bit for that.
Yeah, it's scary.
So that's cool. But it's been a slow grow, and it's cool to see the development, and that you have laid such a strong foundation, that you have not just a foundation musically or with your audience, but even just with, I think, personally with yourself, knowing that just what kind of creator that you want to be, at least where you're willing to go, because you've now done quite a lot, and you've explored different avenues in different areas, from the influencer thing to the marketing world with the band, the solo thing, and this is the foundation, this is the history you've come from. And it's like, right, it's the overnight success that took 10 years in the making kind of a thing.
Exactly.
Which is the story of everybody, that we just don't hear about. And like, right, the headlines and the press releases are, he blew up on TikTok and boom, it's like, no. I mean, like, if you just like dig a little bit below the surface, it's like, no, you've had a very long, healthy career laying all of these foundations. So, Ricky, thank you so much for coming on the show. I have one final question that I ask everybody who comes on the show. What does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
Yes. So I wrote my little answer here that I have on a piece of paper, so that I was somewhat concise. So in my opinion, you have made it, quote unquote, once you can make a living reliably off of your music without giving up ownership of your masters or your creative autonomy. And I want to add on to that, inherent in making it is, and in living reliably off of your music, is understanding that the current age is reliant on your ability to navigate apps that get destroyed. And you can kind of anticipate that you need to diversify constantly.
Yes.
Honestly. And be aware of the relationship of the market with your music, because nobody wants to, but you do have to kind of be an entrepreneur in this environment. So yeah, that's a somewhat long-winded version of what I wanted to say, but I think that's a good answer.
I love it. Ricky Montgomery, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, man. Thank you.